out there, as it been mentioned, we played at Notre Dame, but we also played together with Pittsburgh.
Yeah, you couldn't get rid of him.
No, I couldn't get rid of it. So he was there for 6 years in Pittsburgh as he and Bradshaw were 1 and 2 quarterbacks, and he was a backup before he went to Tampa. But anyway, he said that was, Chuck was that kind of a guy, meaning that he would, he's not a yeller or screamer, he was just an even-tempered guy, but he just always made you feel a little bit uneasy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there was just, he wasn't a rah-rah guy. He wasn't embracing. He wasn't a ball player's coach. He was the coach. And he had a great respect, but he also had a job to do. I mean, he also had decisions to be made, so he couldn't be the buddy kind of guy, but he respected and ultimately loved all of his players. And what happens and happened to the Steelers in the early part of the 80s, when you start making that transition. And what happens is that you kind of hang on to players longer than maybe they need to be hung on to.
Right.
And so all of a sudden you have a weakness because you have no backups or you don't have any young people coming in and they're not necessarily doing the job, but how do you get rid of them?
Right.
And so Chuck had that whole sensitivity about him and his players, and so I respect Chuck for his knowledge, for his ability to get it across to the players and get exactly what he wanted to get accomplished, and he did.
And a different guy than Ara. You played for another legend. Yeah,
right.
Much different.
Yeah, much different. And Ara, but they were both, I should say this, and every coach that I had was, very, they knew the game, they understood the game, they had their own mindset and how the game should be won and how you handle, people. Ara, so Era's, you got a group of 18 to 22-year-old kids,
right,
and trying to get the most out of them, and they're changing every 2 years, or you're getting a new batch coming in, and so you got to grow or make it sound like professional, where you got a team that you can keep for a period of time. But in college, you got to motivate each and every one of those kids, and Era was very good at doing that, and he was very good at his position, and he was very good at designated authority amongst his assistant coaches, and allowing them to have an interaction and a voice in how an offense or a defense should run. So, so Era was that kind of a guy, and so. As Chuck was a little different, but on a professional level, had to handle the guys differently.
You mentioned about your work in the media. You've been an author, as we're going to talk about here. As we wrap up, you've been an actor, you've been a motivational speaker, and also a number of charitable causes I know that you've been involved with, particularly your work, not surprisingly, with veterans and with the Vietnam veterans, but also with veterans in the military in particular. I know with the reissue of your book, Fighting Back, and also the Beating the Odds Foundation.
That's right. Thank you. So, I think part of it is that there's a certain responsibility that a player has to give back to his community. For so long, you're in quote, the public eye. And hopefully there's something you can do with that recognition to help communities or become involved. And so over the years, I have become involved in that regard. So Beating the Odds Foundation was one of the earliest ones. It was 30 years that Rocco Scalzi started, and I worked together in Beating the Odds Foundation. Beating the Odds is basically is helping students to define outside of the curriculum in the schools, to define what they want to do, the stepping stones of success to be able to get them through programs, et cetera, et cetera. And it's something that the school district has to buy into, and it's a third-party relationship because we don't necessarily get that in our school systems today on how to be successful, how to expand, what do you want to do? And we give them those opportunities and called the quarterbacks of life as well. So we've worked, for instance, with NASA for the last 8 years, student initiatives, working with NASA on a project. And they have to do their research along with NASA. And then eventually they get a chance to go down to NASA and to present their papers to the astronauts that are working there. So it's kind of that interaction. So they've done. So Beating the Odds Foundation is wonderful. We've worked with school districts around the country, incorporating our stepping stones of success and the programs that come with it. So that helps those students become a little bit better, and then from a military point of view, and the biggest thing in a military point of view is I work with a foundation called Warriors to Citizens, and it's transitional. And one of the biggest things are military people making transitions back into civilian life and the support mechanism that they need to be able to do so. In all transitions, no matter what we do, as we go through life, we make transitions from high school to college to the workforce. How do I do it from job to job? And the military people specifically have some issues. So part of the statistic, you talk about our deployment issues today, and because of that, divorce rates have been up. You have isolation, you have mental health problems because of Vietnam veterans were Agent Orange, and so from a combat syndrome of coming back and then having multiple deployments does take a toll, and so so you get this whole psychological built-up of military people that they can't go anyplace because they don't want their superiors to know that they might be thinking about a weakness in their system, that macho feeling. Well, it doesn't happen to me, but it does. So where do you go? How do I deal with it? How do I take care of my family without having to report it to my superiors? And so these are programs that have been established within the different branches that become very important, and just become an awareness factor that there's solutions out there. So, and throughout the year, there's a lot of charities out there that support our military and do some wonderful work within their communities. And so I just, tell people that to be aware of what they might be and how they can help them, no matter where they live, because there's somebody that needs a hand up and a support mechanism. And so your monies work wonders in that regards. So you just give back, that's it, as best you possibly can.
Absolutely. And the book that you reissued, Fighting Back, is also involved with a fundraising campaign. If nobody out there has not had the opportunity, if anybody out there hasn't had the opportunity, you should check it out.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, so we reissued and redid the book Fighting Back, which I originally did back in 1974 when we came with the first Super Bowl, and it came out in 75. So then we did a whole reissue of it, added new chapters and some pictures. But anyway, it's and so the proceeds go to military organizations here in Pittsburgh specifically, to Veterans Leadership Program, which is a local group that's been around, started by Vietnam veterans some 30 years ago, hands-on. They do wonderful work in our community specifically. So the money goes to them.
Great. And also, if people haven't checked out the return on E-60, it's moving, it's inspirational. As you look back to your return to the hip Duck Valley from 2 years ago, Rocky, the experience, was it worth it to go back for the catharsis of that moment? Because it was a difficult moment for you on many levels.
Well, yeah, and no one knew. I didn't know that moment was going to happen, or what I was going to expect, or what did ESPN. And when ESPN approached me to be able to say, hey, let's go back and do this, and so it would have been their 50th anniversary. And I go, okay, fine. So we worked out our schedules so that we were able to tie everybody up at the time. And so I said, but, I said, unlike the majority of Vietnam veterans specifically, who, when they came back from their duty of fighting over in Vietnam, had to repress their feelings. I mean, our society did not accept them. They tied the military into the conflict, and so the military soldier was spat upon, looked down upon as baby killers, and so on and so on. You were told to change into civilian clothes just to make it easier on yourself, and so on and so on. So that whole group of people come back and they repress their feelings. They go about their lives, go back to school, get a job, get married, raise kids, but they have nothing to, they weren't able to share their feelings. I come back and I become a story because I come back to a high profile industry trying to make the team of football. Whether I made it or not, it becomes the story of this kid trying to overcome these obstacles to be able to do that. So because of it, I had to answer questions. How did you feel? What was it like? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so somewhat of it was a catharsis for me to have to do that. At least I got a chance to talk about it and had a platform. And also because you were coming back and you did make the team and you then were perceived as a courageous young man. So it was kind of a positive feedback that you got. And so I said, no, I've been telling that story for 40 years. I said, so I don't know what to expect when we go back to Vietnam.
Yeah.
So they did all their homework and went back to the exact spot, where it was to take place, where the firefight was and where I got hit in the open rice paddies and so on. And so, after 50 years, was this the place or not? It was kind of like the area. As much as I could remember it, it kind of fits the geographical area and what I saw there. And I thought, yeah, okay, fine. This is where we came out of the woods. It's changed and there's a little overgrown, in those rice paddies, and it's different because it was a life-changing experience within a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
It's not as if you'd been there forever and understood. So I said, okay, fine. And so we started talking about it with Tom Rinaldi, who is the host. And then he asked me the one question. He just asked me the one question, which was, how do you feel? And Bernie, I tell you what, out of the blue, just out of the blue, I don't know where this emotion came from. It came from the bottom of my soles of my feet up through my body. I could feel it. I could just feel it overcoming my sense of being. And all of a sudden I start to cry, and it's just emotional about that. And part of me is thinking, what's going on here? And the other part was saying, why are you doing this?